Obviously, Zelensky would like to see this invitation that could come up at the NATO council level, at the level of ambassadors, and then later on, depending who is in the White House next year, could either be advanced or, it could never mature. But I think this is a signal to Putin, first of all, that Ukraine's future is and will be in NATO because of the way Ukraine already fights the war. Ukraine is using, NATO capabilities. Ukraine is learning interoperability, and Ukraine, in the way, cannot defend itself against Russia without a collective security architecture.
President Zelensky has unveiled Ukraine's victory plan to his nation's parliament. He says it's achievable, but will, of course, need the support of international partners. We can talk now to Orysia Lutsevych, who's head of the Ukrainian Forum at Chatham House. A very good afternoon from us. Would you be able to talk us briefly through the key points of the plan?
Good to be with you. Yes, it's finally Zelensky is talking about this plan to his own MPs and to Ukrainian people, because he has been presenting it extensively in Washington to President Biden, but also here in London to Starmer. So what he really says, he started by saying that Russia is not interested in searching of a peaceful solution, that President Putin is not showing any signs that he's changing, and he's deaf to those who are proposing him, a peaceful settlement. And then he moved to saying that there are 5 ways, and most of them depend on Western partners being willing to back Ukraine and to work with Ukraine to actually compel Putin to settle and to change circumstances, as he several times emphasized. We need to change circumstances of this war. And that means actually, number one, it's security for Ukraine. He says it includes the invitation for NATO membership, not membership itself yet, but an invitation to become a member. It includes provision of defense assistance that will change the situation on the battlefield. It's also about future deterrence, which is interesting, that he has offered to the UK and the US, and that is part of the secret protocol, placement of a certain non-nuclear capabilities that would defer a new attack of Russia on Ukraine. It includes an economic pillar. It means Ukraine is able to function as an economy with a strong military defense production lines, and also is able to export through the Black Sea. And the last one is related to the post-war Ukraine, and that means Ukraine will be a provider of security, not just the beneficiary of security. Being the strongest army in Europe, President Zelensky says Ukrainian armed forces can replace U.S. force in on Eastern's NATO flank.
Yeah. You've got to admire him, haven't you, for doing this. It is so clever to put into all of our minds the possibility of winning, the plan for winning, and the belief that Ukraine still will win. You've got to hand it to him, haven't you?
Absolutely. But, let's remember that President Zelensky is a very talented politician and actor. He gets his strengths from Ukrainian people who overwhelmingly, more than 50%, despite all the difficulties, trust him. And also themselves, more than 50%, believe they can win. And that ambition of Ukrainians who know the high price they pay daily, the losses, the suffering, the cost, the destruction, is not hidden from Ukrainian eyes. I've looked at some of the polling, and roughly 40% believe that the victory of Ukraine will be the expansion, expel the Russian troops to the front line, away to the recognized borders of 2014, before the annexation of Crimea and the war that they started in Donbass. So he is backed by his own voters, by his own people, even today.
Yeah, but outside of Ukraine also lie an awful lot of people who really matter, obviously. And if we can just talk a bit about the invitation to join NATO. I mean, obviously, this is something that President Zelensky Zelensky has been saying since 2022. We are in a very odd kind of holding pattern about NATO at the moment, aren't we, Orysia? Not least because of what may or may not happen in America. So does that plea, I mean, this is in at number one in the key points of his victory plan. Are we in any different a position today than we were in 2022 with regard to that?
Well, we had two significant summits, one in Vilnius in 2023 and one in Washington this year, where all the political leaders, all the NATO members said Ukraine will be a member of NATO. But what President Zelensky is saying, that we basically should take away Ukraine's NATO membership from the negotiating table with Putin. It's not something Ukraine is willing to negotiate. It's security with Russia, because Russia is a threat. It's an aggressive neighbor. This is why, obviously, Zelensky would like to see this invitation that could come up at the NATO council level, at the level of ambassadors, and then later on, depending who is in the White House next year, could either be advanced or, it could never mature. But I think this is a signal to Putin, first of all, that Ukraine's future is and will be in NATO because of the way Ukraine already fights the war. Ukraine is using, NATO capabilities. Ukraine is learning interoperability, and Ukraine, in the way, cannot defend itself against Russia without a collective security architecture.
Yeah.
So obviously, it's not clear whether this will happen, but this is his ambition.
Final question, and I'm sorry that we don't have very much time left, so a brief answer if you can. It would obviously be a huge vote of confidence in Ukraine's ability to win if other international companies were going to engage in President Zelensky's ambition of economic growth and cooperation. How much outside investment is there in Ukraine at the moment to actually say, yes, we believe you can do it, so we're going to put our money where our mouth is?
Well, I think investment in Ukraine right now could be a win-win, especially in defense and security sectors, because Ukraine is in the forefront of a new revolution in military capabilities. And we already see these investors coming in. Western companies such as German Rheinmetall is opening its production in Ukraine. Bayer, the UK prime, is opened its office in Kiev. So we see slow, but I think steady growth, specifically in defense sector, but also consumer goods and logistics and construction sectors are seeing a certain boom because Ukraine already starts rebuilding. For Ukraine to survive this long war, it needs to also win on the economic front. And this is where private sector is so important.
It's so good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for your time this afternoon. Orysia Lutsevych is head of the Ukraine Forum at Chatham House.